Here's Chief Meteorologist Gannon Medwick with your first alert forecast.
24 hours ago, we were looking at clouds and raindrops, but temperatures were in the 50s and 60s. Lots of bright sun on your West Shore home First Alert Skycam network this noon, like the view from Southport to Oak Island Light, Caswell Beach, and the view from the Murchison Building in downtown Wilmington and out your window. But we've got temps in the 30s and wind chills in the 20s, so a little bit of a trade-off here in winter time. Weather tends to warm up when we get the clouds and precipitation, and then chills down when it clears out. Let's add some stats from ILM Airport here at now 12:16 is 36 degrees and still feels like 29. So a northwest wind, just 9 miles an hour, enough to force that wind chill down. For the rest of today, expect more bright, brisk, and cold conditions. A lot of backyards managing to claw into the lower 40s, but our absolute tippy-top ceiling is middle 40s. And there could be some backyards that maybe top out like 39, 40. So that's the neighborhood. And tonight, it's going to be cold in your neighborhood. A lot like last night. We're headed for the 20s. Unlike last night, the winds will be a lot lazier. So here's another trade-off. We don't get much of an extra wind chill factor on top of this cold stuff, but even though the air is very dry, the lighter breezes could sponsor some frost on some surfaces under the clear skies. Tomorrow, fair skies and a little reversal in wind direction helps boost our temperatures. We're targeting deep 50s. Here's this afternoon, a lot of sun, clouds staying away locally and regionally. This is your Cape Fear and Carolina Cloud and Future Radar model. Okay, a couple of packets of cirrus clouds, maybe even a few cumulus tomorrow afternoon as we pause at 4 p.m., just like we went today, tonight, tomorrow with that forecast. Now we're going to push ahead with this model. Watch this. Little bit of sprinkle shower activity there. A moisture-starved front. It'll be another cold front. Pivots through on Friday, and here's the upper level reflection of that big cold trough on Friday as we go long range through what's going to be a cold weekend with the passage of that trough. Notice this, a subtropical ridge that starts to nose back into the southeast and puts its stamp on our 7-day forecast. Days like Monday, Tuesday, you're going to notice we really turn a corner, and beyond that forecast period, I think we not only get 50s and 60s, but 70s for the middle and latter parts of the week. Front and center, though, a lot of cold nights and some pretty chilly days as well, especially tomorrow when you consider how we're doing today and then again this weekend. People, pets, plants, pipes, can't say it enough. We think of those things and keep them top of mind in these cold patterns.
You know, you're talking about that wind. I will say, like, being outside in the cold this morning, it wasn't bad. And then that wind starts blowing. That's when you really feel that it is so cold outside right now.
It's an extra insult. And we'll watch it close, Mara, but I think some of these weekend cold temperatures could come with a side of wind as well. So we'll be talking wind chill then as well.
Whew. All right. Looking forward to those 70s. Thanks, Gannon.